Hello, this is Ed from South River Outfitters. Welcome to Kayak Fishing with the Pros. At this event, you can learn from the country's top kayak anglers. We will share their best practices and tips for hooking and landing more fish. From rigging the kayaks to choosing the right lure, these professional anglers will share it all at this event. You can learn in one day what would take years to learn on your own. Next, we have Brian Nelli from Pushin Water Kayak Charters, and he's going to speak to us about offshore kayak fishing. Thanks for joining us.
I've been running Pushin Water for the last 5 years. We do inshore and offshore charters. But today we're going to talk about offshore. I am the only one today talking about this, I guess. So hopefully I do all right for you. Learn some things. Real quick, it's like Thad and Christina touched on, with safety. It's a little more important when you're going offshore. The main things for you is obviously a life jacket. I like having a flag on it, at least one boat when I'm taking a group out. Also a VHF if you really want to, be sure that you have all your safety points checked off. A lot of people that, the first question they ask me when they go out is, oh, what about sharks? And they're worried about sharks and things like that. But the main thing you really need to be worried about is other boats. They're your biggest thing in safety-wise, is other boats out there being able to see you and being visible to them. So a lot of guys, they'll like to listen to music. Greg does this inshore. Some guys will actually listen to earphones and have them in their ears, and I don't recommend it, just to the fact of you need to be listening, you need to be hearing what's going on in regards to safety, because a boat can come up on you real quick and you won't even know about it. So that's the main things of that is other boats. Do real quick with the rigging, I kind of want to get into more technique stuff, but for me, when you're rigging your boat out for offshore especially, you want to kind of plan it out and figure out where your stuff's going to be, especially because you're launching in the surf. You want to be able to jump in real quick if you have large surf and start paddling. So for me, I kind of I have everything on my right side, my downrigger, my depth finder, my camera mount. So generally, I don't have a rod here, and then when I go into the surf, I can jump in real fast and get going. That's the one thing majorly you need to think about when you're rigging your boat out to go off there. Like I said, I do have a downrigger on my boat. Other than that, there's really nothing else that's kind of special. My rod extenders, and then my live well bucket here that I kind of homemade. That's a little cheaper than buying a normal live well. The downrigger I've been kind of using less frequently. It is a nice tool to be able to put your baits down to a certain depth. If you're marking fish in, say, 60 feet, 80 feet, generally that's where I'm putting that down to. And it does help get that bait down there and, target those fish. Electronics, basic thing, GPS, fish finder. You don't need an expensive one. This one's a little more expensive than you really need. It's just anything that you can afford that has a GPS fish finder. If you can't afford a GPS fish finder, get a fish finder. Something that's going to tell you depth is really what you need to know. That's going to be the main thing. Rods and reels. Christina touched on it a little bit. She likes using that conventional for jigging. I say that's not the best way to go. Just for ease of use. She's talked about the Shimano Trevella. This is a Shimano Trevella rod. It's a 40 to 80 pound rod, rigged up with a 50 size Cabo. It's 6'6", plenty of backbone on it for normal jigging, and when we're jigging, it's basically jigging for tuna. We do some bottom stuff for, amberjacks and almaco jacks and things like that, and some mutton snapper. But majority of the time, we're just jigging for tuna, and your tuna is going to average 5 pounds to 30 pounds, and this is going to handle it. It's 30-pound tests. I have like 250 yards of 30-pound on here, and that's generally going to be enough for you. I'll run a 40-pound fluorocarbon leader. That's with the jig rod as well as live bait rod. I'm always using 40-pound unless I'm doing, say, a sailfish tournament where wire is not allowed. I'll jump my leader up to 60-pound because you're going to have that billfish damaging your leader. Rods and reels, live bait. This is, majority of people, you're not going to be able to see this, and I don't know if I want to hand it around because the hooks are on it. All right. But your normal stinger rig for live bait fishing is going to be, your 4.0, 5.0 J hook in the front with 3, 4, 5, 6 inches, depending on how big your bait is. You want that stinger hook kind of in the mid-range to back portion of your live bait. With the ones that you generally find that are pre-made you can buy in the store, it's going to have the main wire attached to the eye of the hook, as well as the stinger rig attached to the eye of the hook. And then your stinger hook's going to be kind of loose and flopping around. So now what I see an issue with this is that now 90% of the time you're going to catch your fish on your back stinger hook, but I'd rather have 100% of everything trying to get stuck on something. But when you pull this, and sometimes that lead hook is like off to the side, it's off to the left, it's off to the right. It can go any which way. Now it's way that way, so if you're pulling this way, that hook's not doing anything in the front. It's just useless. What I'll do is rig this up a little different. And basically this wire, I use 60-pound wire with the smallest swivel you can get. This is a 50-pound Eagle Claw barrel swivel. You can use any kind of swivel, just smaller the better. Now what I'll do is the same thing, tied to the eye of the hook, but then I'll tie my stinger to the bottom of the hook there. So now that when you're pulling on this and say you get a bite, this is all in line. Everything's going the same direction, and it's not flopping around like that. And then with my stinger on the back, I'll have it, which is called a stiff rig. Now you see it's not flopping around, it's sitting in one spot. So when that gets pulled, it's straight in line. It's not this way, that way, where might not set up right where you want it. That's what I like to do. Some people prefer the original way, you can do that, but I found more success doing it like that. And like I said, Kelly, you can pass that around if you want. You can take a look at it. It's very simple to rig. I tie all my own leaders or stinger rigs and wire. But like I said, if you wanted to do it and you're starting out, you can go buy pre-made ones at the store. Artificial. Can't speak. Like I said, we do a lot of jigging for tuna. There's multiple different jigs that you can use. I prefer more streamline because, like I said, we like to target tuna mostly. This is just a bomber jig, but it's more streamlined. It goes down quicker, comes up quicker. There's less resistance. When you're jigging, you're going to get tired. It's something you kind of got to get a technique worked out to where your arm's not going to fall off every time you do it. So, I mean, with these, it's going to make it easier. It comes up fast, goes down quick, and for the tuna, they like something fast moving. Now, if you're targeting something else, and I'm not saying this won't work with tuna, but these will work just as good, but there's going to be more resistance. This is going to come up and it's going to, wobble more as it goes up and as it goes down. So it's going to take longer to get down, and there's going to be more resistance as you bring it up, which in return is going to tire you out a little more. This is another more streamlined one, a Williamson. I prefer using just Williamsons, they're the cheapest, and honestly, you could put a butter knife on there and it's going to work just the same. But, it's just something fast and shiny moving. It really doesn't matter. A lot of times I like to scale down to something a little smaller. This is a 3-ounce. If the current's not bad, you can get your jig down a little quicker. I like to use as small as possible, but generally you're going to use a 5 to 6 ounce in order to get it to a depth that you want and bring it back up without having your line taken away as the current goes. That's why another reason I'll use 30-pound test on their braid instead of mono. If you use a mono, that line's going to be taken easily with the current. And say if you drop your jig right here, by the time it gets down to 100 feet, your jig's going to be way over there, and then you're just you're going sideways up with it. You want to be more up and down with the jig. Besides jigging, if you're not willing to buy live bait or sit there and try to catch live bait, plugs work just as good. When I first started out, I used plugs exclusively. I really didn't use much bait. A lot of these plugs, I like using the deep divers. This is a bomber. Yozuri makes great ones, crystal minnows. Sometimes I'll find that these work great with tuna and kings as well, of course. But tuna love these, and a lot of times I like to just like the jig, kind of scale it down. This one's a little more streamlined, a little skinnier. And if you can go even a smaller crystal minnow, that sometimes makes a difference in getting the bites. But you don't have to, use live bait all the time. You can still catch fish using artificials. Some other stuff I use. Just a bucktail with an extra trailer hook on it. You can rig it with a sardine or bonita strip. I'll use this pretty much this time of year actually when I'm targeting cobia. It's really pretty much the only time of year that I use that. Or if I'm somewhere else, say the Bahamas, I'll use that as well on the bottom, but not generally around here. Another thing is DOA swim and mullet. I've caught many cobia on that. Same thing, just bouncing the reef. In this area, you can go You can go to shallow water wrecks. It's like 3 miles out. Sand Hill, of course, is a spot, but you also can just go off the beach and say 40, 60 feet and do a lot of sight fishing for cobia this time of year and the next month or so. These are great for that, as well as a bait buster I like to use. Generally on my boat, I'll have a jig rod, a live bait rod, and a pitch rod. That's if I'm fishing further south, say Palm Beach down further south, to where you always have a chance of a dolphin or a tuna popping up next to you that you can go ahead and throw pitch bait. So these are great for pitch baits as well as the airheads. I like using airheads because they're easy to get a lot of movement off the bait, and the dolphin will stay enticed and come after it that way. Trolling, did that. All right, live bait trolling. I talked about the downrigger. On most trips, I'm going to be running a flat line and a downrigger bait. I don't want to run more lines than necessary. And with you running your downrigger and a flat line, you don't really have much opportunity to get tangled up. Some people do run 2 flat lines. I preferably don't do that. If I want a little more of like something to stay higher up and not on my downrigger, I'll run a small egg weight with a rubber band. That kind of just gets that line separated from my other rod. I don't want to put, some people, you can put big, your rod holders extended out this way and kind of spread them out a little more. I just don't prefer to do that. I like having it with my extenders like that and just running it. The one on top and the one with a little egg weight just kind of gets separation of the line. With the downrigger, again, it's a great tool. It can also be a hassle because when you get a bite, even on your flat or your downrigger, you need to crank that up and get it out of the way because you don't want something getting wrapped around it and breaking off. Every turn of that handle is a foot, and like I said, generally 60 to 80 feet is where you're targeting. So that's 60 to 80 turns. You got to crank that back up to get it out of the way. And there's been times where I've lost fish getting that tangled in there. So it is a great tool, but it can be a pain. But like I said, there's other ways of doing it. You don't have to use a downrigger. You can use your egg weights with a rubber band on your line, and I can show you afterwards if you want to look exactly how to do it. But that'll get it down too as well. I have some that you can use a 10-ounce bank sinker, and that's going to definitely, even with current, will bring that down to a 60-foot depth. You don't know exactly where 60 foot is with that. That's the only problem. That's why the downrigger is good, because you know exactly where that bait's sitting. Because like I said, every crank is about a foot. Normal live bait trolling, like I said, is going to be used with the stinger rigs. Again, if I'm specifically targeting dolphin or I'm in a sailfish tournament, obviously a sailfish tournament, they're going to require circle hooks, and I like using circle hooks with dolphin. But don't be thinking that you're running a wire rig that you're not going to get a sailfish. We catch them all the time. Every charter I do, I'm not using circle hooks for charters. It's using a stinger rig, wire rig, and they do not mind. They'll still crush your bait. The jigging. All right. Like I said, with jigging, it's a lot easier, in my opinion, to use a spinning rod just because you can get a quicker motion going. The idea is to get a nice bounce and have that tip going and getting that jig darting up and flashing. My preferred method is reeling and jigging at the same time as fast as you can is generally the best way to do it. You can do a high jig, reel down real fast, high jig, reel down real fast. Something's not working, change it up. Just as long as you're moving that thing so you know it's moving around and darting around and moving kind of fast. That's the best way to do it. Like I said, it will destroy your shoulder if you just sit there and you don't have your arm rested on anything. What I like to do is kind of use the foot well here and kind of prop my leg in there, put my elbow on my knee, and as I'm sitting there, my elbow's taking majority of the weight, so my shoulder doesn't give out. A lot of times, like on days that the tuna's running good, and we're coming back with a dozen to 20 tuna, we were jigging all day. So it's 5-6 hours of jigging. So it will put a toll on you. Fighting a fish. Again, said the main thing is clearing your lines. That's the first thing you're gonna want to do. Well, first thing is you want to pick the rod up after you hear that line go. Oh, one thing I want to touch on too, braid versus mono. I prefer using braid because I like using smaller setups. Now I have a 10,000 series reel here. You can use it 8. Really, whatever you can get about 300 yards of line on is what you want to go with. I like using the light jig rod even for a live bait rod because it's lighter, it's more compact. I'm not hitting it on stuff. I'm not fighting my rod instead of fighting the fish. A lot of people complain saying, oh, you need to stretch a mono. I don't see that. I run my drag as I'm doing a live bait rod, and so when I get that strike, my jag is not, winded down. It has enough drag so that it's gonna pull the line. It's not, you don't have to worry about pulling the hook out of the fish. I also use the braid, Finn's braid. It's the shock absorber. I just started using it. I kind of like it. It has a little more 10%. It's got like 10% stretch or something, right, John? 10% stretch. I don't know if it does or not, but like I said, anything that helps. But I still want braid, mainly for the compactness, and I can put as much line on there as I can, and not have to use a big honking reel to do that. When you get a bite, main thing is stay tight, especially with sailfish. That sailfish generally is gonna jump out of the water real quick, either running at you or away from you. Most of the time, for some reason, they run at you, and then you're sitting there cranking as hard as you can, and that line's still slack. But the main thing is get tight, stay tight. As soon as you get an idea where that fish is going, point your bow towards that fish. You always want to be pointed towards the fish so that you don't have an issue of, I'm not saying I've ever had any issues with people tipping over fighting fish, but it could happen. But it can happen if you do get a bigger fish next to the boat and he wants to turn and you're over here like this. So if the fish is running away, turn that boat, go after him. I like to fight fish up and down, especially on sailfish. They're gonna run, chase them down, use your pedals, use your paddle. If you can do a paddle and fight the fish stand down, that's why I like the Hobies. You can use your pedals, catch up to the fish, get right on top of them, and then go straight up and down fight. It's the best way to do it. Well, for instance, with this boat or any boat, get your fins up. If you have other stuff that's sticking in the water, make sure they're out of the way. If you run a depth finder that runs off the side of your boat, make sure that's out of the way. If you have wheels in the back of your boat that are sticking down through your scupper holes, make sure you're not letting that fish get around that. The main thing that you're going to lose fish on is getting stuff stuck on something stupid right next to your boat, and you're going to be upset at yourself. So just make sure you got everything cleared out of the way. Big thing is making sure to tire the fish out. Sailfish, I kind of like to put a little heat on just so they have a little more energy to swim away. If you can, get them in quicker than normal. Dolphin, especially cobia, they will give you a fight at the boat if you bring them in too quick. And a lot of times you'll have them jump out of the boat and you'll lose them. So a lot of times especially dolphin, I'm throwing them in the boat and then sitting on them so they can't jump out of there. They will always be a pain in the butt for me. Like I said, quick release for sails. Making an effort to revive them, of course. We want to preserve our fishery, and if you can get them in quick and easy, then it's a lot easier for that fish to swim off, and we'll have a good fishery in the future. I'd like to thank Ed and South River for putting on the event.